Good morning, everybody. Thanks for a beautiful ceremony this morning and nice sitting. I want to start out by saying, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen master, he says that the next Buddha will not be a person. The next Buddha will be the Sangha. And you guys are it, right? The Sangha. The Sangha is the Buddha. In this talk, I'd like to talk about continue to talk about the 8 points for optimizing our meditation practice, optimizing our Zazen, our seated meditation. And this is the 7th point, so we've been gradually moving through all of these points about how we can actually improve our sitting experience. And this point has to do with Sesshin. So what I'd like to share in this brief talk is what the meaning of Sesshin is. That's the first thing. The second thing is about ego dissolution, dissolving the ego. And the third thing is learning the Dharma. All right, so the first point is, first of all, what is Sesshin? What is the meaning of Sesshin? What is it? So I'd like to, first of all, describe Sesshin. And I'd like to do so by opening with the thought that the Buddha himself was a human being, not a god. The Buddha was a human being. And because he was a human being like you and I, he knew firsthand and understood what it means to suffer, what it means to suffer as a human being. And if we go to practice with our suffering, the suffering that resides in our heart, if we go to practice acknowledging that we suffer, then we'll be able to connect with the Buddha. The very first koan in the Gateless Gate, Mumonkan, is about mu, or what's been translated as emptiness, or what Thich Nhat Hanh translated as interbeing. And in that koan, it says that if you could enter mu, or interbeing, if you can enter interbeing, then you will walk hand in hand with all of the Buddhas and all of the ancestors. And as a society, generally speaking, we are highly influenced by this idea of individualism. And that gets translated sometimes incorrectly in our sitting practice as just be. Or what do we do in Zazen? We're practicing being. But that is not, that word being, yes, it's true that we're being, right? We're simply being. But it's not complete. And I think Thich Nhat Hanh's word interbeing is actually more helpful for us, that we don't just be, we interbe. And if we can enter into interbeing, we won't be alone. That sense of isolation, of aloneness will scatter. So what does Sesshin mean? Sesshin, first of all, Sesshin means, the word means to touch the heart, right? To touch the heart. And in a sense, it is the Zen Buddhist form of Sabbath, of taking time out for yourself and really touching the heart, allowing the heart to rest deeply in interbeing, allowing the heart to rest deeply in its interconnectedness and its interwovenness with the entire fabric of reality. and to contemplate that. To contemplate that and to soak it up physically, not just intellectually, but also physically, to feel that sense of belonging to the fabric of all reality. And so there's many ways to do that. Some of you have practiced that for, say, a week-long Sesshin, 7 or maybe 8 days, like what we sometimes do for Rohatsu Sesshin, where we commemorate the Buddha's enlightenment. But a lot of us, given our busy schedules, can't take out 8 days out of a whole year to do that kind of sitting practice. And so we also have 2.5 days, like we often do here. We just started back again with Nebraska Zen Center, doing every other month Sesshin, 2.5 days, starting Friday afternoon, going to Sunday afternoon. So, but you don't have, and even sometimes a whole weekend is difficult to do, but we also do half-day sittings, we do full-day sittings. So if you could even take out a half a day or a full day from your schedule to experience a Sabbath in the Zen way of doing that. It's really, really nourishing. It's really, really nourishing. To touch the heart, though, this Sesshin, to touch the heart is not for the faint of heart. Just want to make that clear. This is not an easy practice. Sesshin, in fact, will test us. Sesshin will test our practice. So and for those of you who are not experienced with Sesshin, have had a little bit of meditation practice, I would encourage you all, or even if you've done Sesshin practice, it's always good to come back to Sesshin. But especially those who have not had a lot of sitting practice, maybe just beginning, to have a half-day sitting or to have a full-day sitting practice really helps to deepen our awareness, deepen our understanding of what our practice is about, through deepening our sense of presence, our sense of conscious awareness of ourself, but also of our surroundings, and our sense of belonging to that fabric of reality. Sesshin is the place where words and ideas really become futile. They don't have much ground to stand on if you continue with the Sesshin practice. So, okay, so that's my intro to what is Sesshin. And I think many of you already know, those of you who have done a Sesshin practice, whether for a day or a full week, you guys know what I'm talking about here. And at the end of this talk, I'd love to hear more input from others about Sesshin, those of you who have experienced it. Okay, so number 2, ego dissolution. This is the second part of this talk, is what we inevitably experience is ego dissolution. So what does that mean? We have to be really careful to not underestimate the sway or the power that our thoughts have on us. They bind us up with our ego. Our ego is tightly bound to our thoughts. So if we said, this is who I am and these are my thoughts, they're completely, in our pre-Sesshin self, pre-meditation self, sense of self as usual is not disconnected from our thoughts of who we are. They're completely interwoven. We bind up our sense of self with who we think we are, with our thoughts. And one of the ways that not all by any means, but one of the ways that gets bound up is with our sense of identity. So when we say, I am a, fill in the blank there, I am a Buddhist priest, that's an identity. And we create a sense of self out of that identity. And what the ongoing sitting experience does when we continue to let go of thought, and even without our efforts, when we really sitting day after day after day, or hour after hour after hour, those thoughts about who we are really, it's like some kind of a acid to a what am I trying to say here? So it's like cleaning up the thoughts, and the thoughts dissolve, like how acid dissolves things up. That's what's kind of happening during Sesshin. It's just dissolving up our thoughts without our effort, other than through committing to stay in one place and sit and watch the mind. That's key, is watching the mind. So now the self starts to disentangle itself from thought. And so here's the self and here's thought. And now we're watching the thoughts over here. They're no longer like this, or they're slowly getting disentangled. And now we see, oh, these are my thoughts over here, and this is me. They're not the same. They're not the same. I still exist without thought, right? But this is a very difficult experience for many of us. For some of us, this might be total bliss land. This might feel so compassionate, right? This might be where our compassion really springs up. And that's really, I think, the intention of this disentangling of our thoughts. But that's often not the experience, especially when we're first starting out, or new to meditation, or even if we've been sitting for a while, that might not be the experience. This disentangling of thoughts might come with a lot of anxiety. It might come with a lot of anger. It might come with a lot of physical pain. And so it's helpful to know, like, what's the bigger context in which we're sitting in? Why do I feel disoriented when this decoupling of thoughts takes place during an intensive meditation experience? Why do I feel disoriented? Why don't I feel whole? Why do I feel maybe a lot of fear or anxiety? There's maybe a number of answers to those questions, but one that I'd like us to maybe think about comes from the philosopher Descartes. Descartes was very influential. Whether we understand his philosophy or not, he was very influential for the way that modern Westerners think of themselves. He said, I think, therefore I am. Now, in his day, that was a huge statement to say, I think, therefore I am, right? It was a coupling of thoughts with a sense of self. And it also created this dualism between human beings that he thought think versus non-human beings that don't think. It created this kind of a dualism. And we modern people, without being conscious of it, we have accepted that way of that particular philosophy over the past couple hundred years. And that influences how we perceive what's happening in our meditation. And so it's helpful to know, like right from the start, okay, we suffer as a society, we suffer from this kind of way of thinking about the self that is identified with thought. I think, therefore I am. And so what happens in our minds, what's happening is when we decouple thoughts, it's a kind of like a dying experience if we're coming at it from this unconscious way of thinking of I think, therefore I am. To decouple from our thoughts is to not exist in a sense, right? If we wholeheartedly embraced unconsciously, if we wholeheartedly embrace this idea of I think, therefore I am, then to decouple from our thoughts is a frightening, scary experience, creating a lot of anxiety. So, okay, so that's the dissolution of ego. Now, for some people, though, for some of us, that can be a very deep feeling of love. This dissolution of ego can be come with it a very deep feeling of peace, of inner peace, a very deep feeling of our connectedness, of our interbeing with all of life. It can accompany that as well. That can accompany us too. But point 3 here of this talk, the last point I want to make, is that we can facilitate this sense of compassion, of love, of interbeing by way of continuing to study the Dharma. Right? So Dogen says to study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self, right? So the second point is about forgetting the self. The third point, he says, to forget the self is to be one with the myriad things. So, okay, well, the question is, if we're suffering, how do we end suffering, right? If we're at Sesshin, touching the heart, if we're touching the heart, there is an acknowledgement that there's suffering going on in our life. There's some acknowledgement there, right? And Sesshin is to address that suffering, to help. And so how do we do that? How do we do that? The key is to learn the Dharma. To learn, I don't mean just study it. Yeah, it's good to study it with the intellect up here, but to learn it. How do we learn it? We learn it through things like Dharma talks, right? Call it watering the seeds of the Dharma. So you hear a Dharma talk, and the Dharma talk can help that rain of the Dharma to penetrate the heart so that the Dharma starts to take root in our heart, right? In our heart. So through Dharma talks, through chanting, right? The Faith and Mind Sutra that we just chanted here is Dharma, and we're chanting that Dharma. Reading the Dharma, just plain reading. Pick up a Dharmic text, pick up a sutra and read it, or pick up commentaries on the sutras and read it and study, right? And the other thing I want to mention is to teach ourself the Dharma. Teach ourself the Dharma. It's nice to hear the Dharma being proclaimed by a teacher or reading about it, but you can also teach yourself the Dharma, right? So because the teacher is you. The next Buddha is the Sangha, right? And so as a Sangha member, you have that power in you. You have the Buddha in you. If you touch your heart and you're suffering, you're connected with the Buddha. The Buddha was a human being. The Buddha suffered just like we do. You have Buddha inside of you. You have that awakened nature inside of you. You have that compassion, that love inside of you. You can teach yourself the Dharma too. Regardless, we've all made mistakes. None of us are perfect. Just like Faith and Mind says, when you dissolve that dualistic mind, we don't worry about our imperfections. You have the capacity to teach the Dharma to yourself too. And you can do that while you're silently sitting. While you feel it, like, what is that? When you're sitting in Zazen, you can ask yourself, what's the Dharma right now? What is the Dharma teaching me? Right? You have a unique take on the Dharma, and your whole soul wants to hear that Dharma talk, while you're sitting. You have a Dharma talk inside of you, each of you do. So you can, for example, you can remember verses of a sutra that are meaningful to you. You don't have to know the whole sutra, just one line, just a single verse can be very powerful. And if you do that while sitting, that can open up your Zazen experience. The other thing to keep in mind in this third point about studying the Dharma is that the emphasis in Sesshin is not necessarily on well-being, right? The emphasis is not necessarily on our personal well-being. Well-being may or may not come as a byproduct of Sesshin, and well-being will appear and disappear. You know, sometimes it manifests itself and sometimes it disappears. So it's not a good gauge to ask ourselves if I'm, feeling okay. Is not necessarily a good gauge for determining the success of Sesshin. So you might ask, well, why bother doing a Sesshin if it doesn't help me to feel better? And I would answer, it's to see that we don't end at our skin. That was one of the first things that my teacher taught me, and it wasn't inside of a Sesshin, but when she was teaching meditation, she said, we don't end at our skin. Right? This is something that this is what Sesshin is about. And people have all kinds, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, those of you who have had some deep experiences in Sesshin, about us not ending at our skin. If you sit long enough, you'll have some pretty profound and deep experiences of letting go of self, but in a sense that, well, you really feel this sense of interconnectedness with life. And what Sesshin does, this touching of the heart, it aids us in extending our consciousness into the material world, into the physical world. We don't just identify with other humans, but we also come to identify with the more than humans, or the non-human people, as indigenous peoples would refer to the natural world, the non-human peoples. Right? The butterflies, the grasses, the trees, the plants, the animals, all of them, the birds, right? Can we hear the birds outside preaching the Dharma when they're chirping away, or the wind preaching the Dharma? To forget the self is to be one with the myriad things. To be one with the myriad things is to realize no barrier between self and other. Right? This is Dogen's core teaching, to realize no barrier between self and other, this non-dualism. All right. Thank you. So at this time, I'd love to hear your, what your experience, if you want to add to this, if you've had experience of Sesshin, what keeps you coming back? And I don't have a specific question, but maybe some of the things I've shared resonate with some of you, or you want to inspires you to share something with us to encourage those that haven't necessarily done a longer sitting period to perhaps think about it. All right. And I know we all have we have limited capacities to how much time we can devote to our formal practice. So I don't want anyone to be discouraged if they're not able to do more than, say, like a Sunday morning like we're doing now. That's totally fine. But just to plant some seeds, right? Because you never know how our life changes and how things shift, and we can reprioritize things. All right. Thank you all so much.
Daishin, just to get us started, this is Pam. To me, one element of Sesshin that's really an important part of it is the fact that it's a silent practice, not just on the cushion, but outside of the cushion. And to me, doing everything in a silent mode eliminates that reinforcement that spoken words give to thinking.
Hmm.
Thinking and spoken word, just reinforce each other. And it's, spoken words are like a fence around our ego. And, eliminating that urge to use words sort of starts to dissolve that fence around us. And
Yeah.
lots of times, and I know I've heard George say the same thing, after you practice without words with other people, doing the task, eating without words, cooking without words, working without words, by the end of Sesshin, somehow you just feel so connected to everybody who's been there practicing together in a way that you couldn't be connected if you'd been, chatting with each other the whole time.
Yeah, this is so true. And this is such a rare experience for so many of us in society. If you think about it, you go to your workplace and people are chatting away and language is the main means of connecting with people. And when you do sesshin, you realize, well, that's okay, but it's still a fairly shallow form or way of connecting with people. It's not that it can't be done, but I agree with you, Shoju, that there's something really powerful when we can sustain our attention in silence with other people. It's just so profound.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I think some of my favorite memories from Sesshin with Nonan back in the day was really at the end of the first day. Um, Many of us had practiced together quite frequently, and once you get into Sesshin, you quite understand that it's not you and Sesshin, but it's all of us together. Everybody's doing Sesshin together. And there's a great, I've always said there's a great camaraderie that can occur with that. People really, everybody gets to be kind of like an old married couple with each other. Everybody kind of understands their strengths and their weaknesses. If somebody falls short in something, the person right next to them, without even thinking or any kind of discussion, will just move right in place and help that other person out. If they've fallen behind in work practice, suddenly a person will show up and help that person get finished on time. So Sesshin is very much about following the schedule.
Mm.
And, and I've noticed that really at the end of that first day, everybody's been working together. Every session, sure, there's going to be little problems that occur. That's fine. There's no problem with that. If there's a problem that occurs, there's always a little something that happens. But somebody will always step up and will take care of the problem. And one thing I remember is that over the years, retired and active military have come through and sat sessions with us. And I've talked to those people before, and they said, I never thought I could experience camaraderie outside of the military, except here in Sesshin. Everybody works harmoniously together in great camaraderie.
Mm.
In August, I went to Hokioji, which is another practice community out in the woods of southern Minnesota. There, I was a stranger to the place. I mean, it had been years since I'd been there, but everybody there I was a stranger to. I didn't know who these people were. Very nice people, but they were all very well. They knew each other. I was kind of the outsider, but they were all very well experienced and practitioners. And after a day or so of just working silently with them, everybody just kind of gets in a groove with everybody. It's a very weird sort of thing. and things just move just right harmoniously right on through. Very long days, very active days, a lot of sitting, a lot of services. Things have to, it's like running a train schedule. Things just have to move right along through. And problems can occur, but they aren't really problems. You just take care of the situation, you move right on. Everybody just keeps moving. And it really is just a beautiful practice. I've always said sessions is where our Zen practice is the rubber where it meets the road. If you really want to deepen your practice, set sessions. You might think this place is like the worst hotel you've ever visited in your life. But it's not really the case, because it's a very unique experience. It's not work, it's not home, it's not in between, this is not vacation. There's things that have to be done here. But once you get into the groove of this and really open yourself up to the experience, it's a very harmonious, very great camaraderie. It can be a very beautiful experience. Unless you're not, interested in having a beautiful experience like I've sometimes had during sessions, then they can be super difficult. And as Noden has said many times, the original founder of the Nebraska Zen Center, if he was saying, if anybody asked him why is Zen practice so difficult, and he'd always say, Zen practice is neither easy nor difficult. You're difficult. That's why Zen practice is difficult.
That sounds like Nora.
Yeah, that's very much like. So yeah, if you never sat Sesshin before, we have a Zazen Kai coming up. That's a short one day. I'd encourage everybody to sit it. Yeah, the hardest, if you've never sat Sesshin before, the hardest thing about Sesshin is finding time to set Sesshin. You have to take time away from work, away from family, away from home. Set that time aside for you. And come up here and just experience it. You'll sit a lot, you'll do services, you'll enjoy eating with everybody before you're and you'll just move on. So yeah, I can talk about sessions for hours on end.
Sure.
Well, I appreciate that, George. I'm wondering, Shoju mentioned the silence, and for some people, not everybody, but for some people, silence is really, really difficult. So I'm wondering, and it can be a real way to dissolve the ego too, and for a lot of folks, that can be very, very scary, and all that silence there. It's very hard for many people to even think about not speaking when they're with other people, when they're with a group of people. I wonder if anybody could speak to the difficulty around that experience, outside of Sesshin, where there's just this assumption that silence is usually meaning, it can often be interpreted as there's danger. And it could be a real off-putting for some people. So I'm wondering if anybody's had trouble with silence, at least when they've done Sesshin, and how they've dealt with that.
Sofa wanna?
Yeah, so go ahead.
I'm kind of talking to, following up on what George said too. I had an experience where I like to talk. If anybody knows me very well, I like to open my mouth. And I made a mistake during Sesshin, and it was, I felt like, oh, I need to take responsibility. And the very first thing I did, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. And I said it out loud, and I'm not supposed to talk, right? And the priest who was leading it just went, and I was so upset. It really, I was like, but I'm trying to apologize and you're telling me to be quiet. And it was such a lesson, because I sat down and I kind of cried even a little bit, and I went, why is he not letting me apologize? I need to let this go. And it was such a powerful learning experience that this is not about me. This is not about anything. This is all just moving along, like George said. Everybody's gonna get through it, and talking actually ruined the moment. But I learned a lesson, so.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that, Sofu. That's important.
So,
Well, when I went to my first 7 day session, and they told me before it started, they were like, okay, so there's no telephone, there's no TV, there's no nothing, there's no reading, there's nothing. Don't look anybody in the eye, don't do all this. And when I heard all these don'ts, I went, what? And they said, this is what it's like to step into freedom. So then I started with that group, and I guess our marketing, we had our group, and our marketing brought in a lot of people from the outside. And so some of them occasionally would like have square cushions and set up a camp and have water and notebooks and all this stuff. And the Eno got with them in short order. After maybe a first period of Zazen, the Eno spoke with them. Many times they left thereafter. But, and then some people would get, who'd never sat, and I'd speak with them, after, before it started, because once it started, there was silence. But I'd speak with them, I'm like, have you ever sat Zazen before? Oh, no. And I'm like, oh, so 40 hours of doing that this week's not going to be a problem, right? And they're like, huh? Day 3, they're like telling the Eno, oh, my back is killing me. And the Eno told them everything to do except leave. You can do like this or do like this or do like this, told them everything. And then those who really had a problem with it slunk off, in the evening or whatever. But this idea of, once you've had a week long of silence, then you start to, like you were saying, not identify with those thoughts. And here's my mind. Like today, I drove here in a car. Was I thinking about it? No. And so, yeah, for me to actually think about something, and I have to move. I have to consciously almost move it. I kind of think of it as a tool shed. And in this shed is this compassion and love, and then over here on this side, I don't like this, and I don't care for this. So you just need to decide what tool you're going to go in there and get and how you're going to use it. That's the way I kind of think about it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for that, Winner.
it's interesting, the different ways that, people experience the Shin. Because, George is talking about, the end of the first day, how everything's, flowing together. But the end of the first day is also the day when a lot of people think, I have got to get out of here. So people disappear at the end of the
We
first
were
day.
all well experienced.
Yeah. Yeah. And and that's fine, it's nice if people can, speak with the priest, before they decide. And the other thing about silence was, it was really interesting. One time we had a first time Sesshin guy, but he was a Lutheran preacher. And afterward he said that when we sat down to eat, he said, it was such a relief not to feel like I needed to talk to anybody. So for him, he probably spends a lot of his life, needing to talk to people. And for him, it was such a relief to realize that he could sit there and not have to talk to anybody.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. I'm just thinking about how important it was for me as a young man starting out doing an intensive sessions, and how important it was to hear the encouragement from my teacher to stick with it, to stay with what you're experiencing, even if that means it's uncomfortable, discomfort. And she would say, if there's an escape hatch, you'll take it. In Sesshin, if there's an escape hatch, you'll take it. But there's such value in staying with your experience. And it can be sometimes the hardest thing for us to do. But one of the things that she would compare it to, if you ever, many of us have had the experience of brewing tea, where you have a cup of hot water, you put the tea bag in the in the water, and usually people just let it sit there. But my teacher, in Japan, it's brewed differently. You put the tea in the water and then you put the lid on it, on the cup, because then the steam doesn't escape. It's forced to infuse the tea leaves. And you keep it on, you keep the lid on so that the steam goes into the tea leaves and brings out its flavors into the water. And then when you're ready to drink it, you remove the lid, take out the tea bags, and enjoy the tea. And Sesshin is kind of like that, where you put the lid on the teacup so that there's no escaping of the steam, and the steam is forced then to go into, in a sense, your Dharma, right? The Buddha's heart. And then that's where the teachings start to emerge. We are replete with the Buddha's teachings within this psycho-physical body. We are replete with the Buddha's Dharma. But we need some discipline, some structure to bring it out. Just like to bring out the flavors of the tea, you need to have the teacup, you need to have the hot water, and you need to have the lid on the teacup. And this brings it out. It's like we're diffusing ourselves. Our own Dharma is getting diffused so that it can come out. And there's so much insight that comes from doing this, potentially. Now, we do have to be careful for a lot of people. If there's some degree of trauma in their lives, then the mind can go in different directions with that. And so we do have to be careful for folks that might get triggered by doing a kind of intensive meditation retreat. We do have to be mindful that might be what some people are experiencing. And that's why I think it's so important to have opportunities also. I know that we're in silence for good chunks of time, but that's why there's also opportunities to verbally communicate. That's why there's one-on-one opportunities with the teacher. And there's this assumption of trust amongst the Sangha, right? The next Buddha is the Sangha. And if we go into Sesshin with an assumption that we can trust the people that we're with, and that might be in itself a stretch for some, but that's kind of the underlying foundation of the Sesshin, is that we trust each other, that we trust that each of us are working and struggling hard, we're suffering, whether we've been doing this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, or there for the first time. We can relate to each other because this is not easy, but we can also have faith in that this container is supporting, it's loving, and there will be a good outcome, even if we're not experiencing it in the present moment.
Well, Daishin, you brought up a really important point that I think is worth emphasizing, is that throughout Sesshin there is the opportunity to speak to the teacher about the experience you're having, about difficulties you're having, and that sort of thing. I think that's a really important element of it.
Yeah. So if we need to communicate something, just know that you can do that really at any time. And I take it very seriously. If somebody wants to talk, let's do it. We'll find the time and we'll do it. I've been there, there's been times I wanted to just hit the eject button. But we can do it. There's power in staying with the experience. There really is. And just want to encourage people to, at least think about it. All right, folks. Well, shall we close there?
Should we bow out?
Let's close the sutra and I'll do
Let's do
some.
closing and then
Yeah, we'll do some
announcements.
Okay.
Yeah, stick around for the announcements.
Do you want to do nothing now, or that's what?
Just close it for.
Save this marriage and universally to all, so that we, together with all beings, realize the Buddha way. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.
Okay. So, one of these is announcements. One of these are announcements. I'll say, oh, Tibetan monks will be back Monday. If everybody missed them, they'll be here Monday through Friday. Also be doing kind of an impromptu Sesshin almost. One of my trainees from Grand Rapids is going to be here for like 7 days, so we'll be in the Zendo a lot, meditating and probably doing oryoki. So if anybody wants to stop by, feel free. But all our regular programming will be going on. So we'll be doing 6 to 7, Monday through Friday. We have meditation in the temple. You can also access that via the internet. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 5:30 to 6, we'll be online with Daishin, leading a bit of meditation for the early crew.
That's both online and.
Also online,
Can be
yep.
present here.
Yep, it's accessible from Nebraska Zen Center. All of that's from Nebraska Center.com
Org.
or .org. Good thing it is. And then also Wednesday night from 6 to 7:30, we do an evening meditation, which is also in temple and available from the website. We also have some upcoming programming. So Friday, October 18th, Daishin will be in town, right? Yes. Doing the full moon ceremony. I don't have a time on that yet, but usually it's the evening.
Usually it's 6, I
6,
think.
right?
Yeah, 6 o'clock.
Wow.
And if you haven't done that, I'd urge you to do at least one. It's a really nice experience. Be prepared to do a lot of battles.
It's a dozen before, right?
Zazen, be 30 minutes zazen, then a ceremony.
We have chanting. Well, we won't. Well, it's part of it is chanting with an actual melody, so it's kind of cool to hear that. I don't know. The following day, on Saturday the 19th, we will have a Zazen Kai, which Daishin alluded to. That is it's like 8 or 9. It's from
8 to 4, I think.
8 to 4. So we do a little bit of meditation, a little bit of oryoki, which is the meditative people love. After you've done it enough, meditative eating, a little bit of work practice. It's I won't say it's an easy practice. But
It's doable.
It's doable.
I'm
Yeah.
convinced you never do it right.
Yes,
I've done it
I mean,
lots.
yeah.
You never do it right.
It's like a work day, basically. Put in your
Speaking
8
of
hours.
Anxiety about non-perfection.
Yeah. And let's see. Oh, and then let's see. So that was that. Then we'll have our regularly scheduled programming on Sunday, which I didn't mention. We have our Sunday split, which is this, of course, that same weekend. Coming up on Sunday, October 27th, we have Seijiki, which I've been excited about because we get to have donuts in the Zendo. That's not the whole part of it, but that's the part I'm most excited about. So Seijiki is part of a very long tradition that goes, its reach goes all the way back to the time of the Buddha, but it's the ghost festival. It's a time of year where they consider, kind of like Halloween with us, where the link between this world and the spirit world is very tenuous, so that our ancestors come back and visit us. How we celebrate that in the Zendo, we cover up all the Buddha statues because the hungry ghosts don't want to hear about the Dharma. We have a separate altar that we put treats on because they love treats. We're also encouraging people to bring non-perishable food in as well that we'll distribute later. into the community. But the real heart of the practice, the way that I practice it, other than the food offering part of it, is that it's a time to, I say, clear our karma, clear our consciousness, research our relationships to people who have passed on, or difficult situations from our past that keep coming up as, quote unquote, ghosts in this present life, things that we haven't been able to let go of, or that are still kind of affecting our lives, and we think bring them up in this practice. We consider them like almost in a physical sense. There's like a whole part where we walk around the zendo and we get to scream, which is something that I find exciting as well.
Bring noisemakers.
Bring noisemakers, yes. We have some here, but you can bring things to make noise. It's you get that energy out. Kind of jar it loose. Think about it. Yeah, it's gonna be very cool. I'm excited. Even if I'm the only one doing it,
It'll be fun.
it's gonna be very exciting.
No, I'll eat the donuts too.
I mean, we'll have
No,
hopefully.
no, those are for the hungry ghosts.
For the priest. Speaking of Sesshin, Rohatsu is coming up as well in December. So Wednesday, December 4th through Sunday, December 8th. This is the celebration of the week that leads up to the Buddha's enlightenment. And so it's not quite 7 days here, but we just do, I won't say an intensive, but we do a retreat and celebrate our reenactment of the Buddha's enlightenment. So at the end of the 7 days, we're all become enlightened like the Buddha. So that you'll be able to, I don't know if the sign up is available yet, but that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You don't have to sit all, I think it's 5 days. You could sit a half day, right? You could sit a full, you could sit 2 days. Wednesday's kind of, it's the middle of the work week, but it's going all the way to Sunday. So if we have some people here on a Friday or Saturday, I'd love to see you. I'll be here the whole time. Like you say, having an escape valve. I don't have an escape valve. I'm going to sit the whole thing, no matter how much. It's usually a rolling experience. At the very beginning, I'm very anxious. I'm like, I don't want to sit for that long. Half hour sounds okay. I'm like, but I'm like, it's 5 days. Similar to George's experience. By the end of the first day, I'm like, that's pretty easy. And then, the next day, and then the next day, and then you start rolling with it. You're doing like a mini Hunger Ghost Festival. You're dredging up this old karma, maybe, and then you're thinking about it, and you're expelling it, hopefully, and then easing into this new way of life. So very exciting.
So it's good, it's good to know, far ahead of time when the Rohatsu will be. So if you want to register for just part of it, all of it, you can do that ahead of time. I'm sure the registration will be up sometime soon.
So yes, it's still a little ways away.
And for everybody, actually, the evening sitting is open to everybody, regardless of registration.
Yeah, come on in. We'd be glad to see you. I guess the last thing, of course, is the Dana announcement. There's ways to, so Dana's part of the paramitas, the paramita of giving. That's, doesn't necessarily have to be a monetary one, but this is how we fund the temple. So I start with the monetary, then I move more into esoteric versions of it. So we have a QR code that's out in the main room that you can scan. There's a link on the website. You can also become a member of the temple, recurring payment if you really want to get into things. And then there's also a Dana bowl out in the main room. We don't have too much specifically non-monetary stuff going on. We'll have some cleanup coming up soon. But I would just say, as Dana, go ahead. You have something?
Well, I was just going to say, we are in the process of setting up a whiteboard, maybe somewhere in the entrance, that's going to list little things that we need help with.
Oh, sure.
And, once we get that set up, that's something that people can check, do a little volunteer.
Sure.
work for them.
Yeah, Soji is a huge part of our practice. If you're on there in the Zazen Kai, we'll be doing some cleaning. But, it's not just that. Dana extends this like a focus of a practice just in our day-to-day life. So like when the Tibetan monks asked if there was a place to stay in the city, this is part of our Dana being like, yes, we have rooms for you. Come and use them. And they're coming back now. It's gonna be so so full. I'm gonna be sleeping in the zendo. So that for me, that's a bit of a. I'm giving my room up to the trainee. That's just some Dana that I'm giving out into the world. Just where is there a need? What can I give? How can I help other people? And helps me as well, because it's a blast being with the monks. So, you know, just bring this thing about bringing this giving aspect into your life. There's a million different ways that you can do that. So that's it for the announcements.